Expo Online Day 2. I'm your host, Meg Kaylee, and I am very excited to be joined by Dylan, Lucas, and Adam, the developers of Peglin, which is a game I'm really excited to learn more about today. But we're going to check out a trailer in just a sec here, but I'd love to hear from one of you, just like a quick overview of what your game is.
Yeah, sounds good. So Peglin is a Pachinko Roguelike. So we pretty much took Peggle and Slay the Spire and smushed them together. And we've been kind of honing on it and iterating on it for about a year and a half now to kind of make it its own thing. So it started as just kind of like an homage to a couple of games that we loved, and it's kind of grown organically from there.
That's amazing. Let's check it out in this trailer. So the first time I saw that trailer, it had me super intrigued, and I just was really interested in this concept. It's described as a Pachinko Roguelike, and when I read that term, I was like, that sounds really neat. Let's take a look at the game. Can you tell us a little bit more in depth about it and what it is? How do we play?
Sure, definitely. Yeah, so you can kind of see from the trailer there, especially if you've played Peggle before, like there's a lot of very familiar elements. You kind of got your peg board and your upcoming orbs, which are mostly different in Peglin. Some of the big differences here are instead of trying to just clear the board and then move on, we're using it as the basis for like an RPG style combat. So you've kind of got all your enemies up there, and they're going to keep advancing towards you and eventually starting to hit you, unless you can take them out using the power of pegs before then.
Yeah, a lot of the inspiration came from formats like Slay the Spire, where we're trying to put a lot of emphasis on the player finding a lot of interesting combinations to do with the different orbs that you can find, the different paths that you can take. We're trying to get as much content into the game so that people feel excited to try again, even if they lost the last run, to make so their next run is more interesting or has a different gameplay mechanics on every run. We're trying to make as much as much as an effort possible to give people a different experience every time.
Yeah, I think it's really great that in a game like this, no two runs are ever really the same. And I'm curious to hear more about some of the things that you've implemented in the game to kind of make sure that each run feels fresh and different from the other ones you've done.
Yeah, that's one of the big reasons that we went with the roguelike format in the first place, is just because you kind of get into like combinatorial explosion, right? Like every piece of content that we add is now like hundreds of thousands to millions of unique runs that people can have. When you're just like pulling orbs from the same pool, like it's essentially a different veneer on a card game. Like it's very much like, here's your deck of cards, and here's what you can do with them. And that's kind of where you get those big combinations that keep things really fresh. And we're still it's still very early in the development cycle of Peglin. We're hoping to come into early access in the next month or two here. But we are kind of reaching a point where we're happy with the amount of content that like leads to those combinations. We've got some demo players that have like dozens of hours, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. We kind of figured like, okay, we've got the demo out, you know, it's like good for an hour of gameplay, and then once people beat it, like that's it, they'll wait for the full game. And that's just not at all what's happened, because it does have a lot of that like combinations and each run feeling unique, and we're feeling really good about that so far.
Yeah, well, the reception that we had after the game was featured in PAX was absolutely mind-blowing. We are kind of humbled by how many people are resonating with it, and our Discord has been really active lately. It's been really nice to see.
That's great. That's such a great sign that, you know, people are playing the demo over and over because it's so fun and they're just like, I want to play it again. That's really, really awesome. And I'm glad to hear that a community's already formed around the game as well. With going into early access, that's a really exciting and big step for any game, I would say. And I'm curious to hear about some of the things you maybe hope to gain from that experience, or what you're looking forward to about it.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, like early access is just a really good genre match for us, because like I was saying, like each time you add new content, you're really just exploding the amount of possible runs that you can have, and it just keeps things really fresh. Like if we were just making an RPG that you played through once from start to finish, and then we added new enemies into like the very first forest area where, hey, you're not just fighting slimes anymore, now we've got other enemies. Players aren't going to see that until they play the game again, if they play the game again, right? If you're making like a 20-hour like small like JRPG style game, there's no promise that anyone's going to sit down and replay that. Whereas with a roguelike, you kind of have the ability to keep things fresh enough for people to keep coming back to, and any new content that you've added is like keeps things surprising, even in those areas that they might have seen over and over and over again. So that was one of the big reasons that we decided to go with early access, just because it fit what we wanted to do. And the thing that's really crystallized it for us, like, okay, we definitely need to bring this game into early access, is from some of our earlier events, you know, you had to get a demo ready for the event. It's like, okay, we'll prepare the demo and we'll put that up, and then we'll take that demo down like after the weekend's done. And what we were seeing is like, why would we take the demo down? Like players are playing it, they're having fun, they're giving us feedback, we're getting better at balancing and like creating new content, and we're really like, you know, starting to cater that new content to what the players need to like complete certain synergies or complete certain builds that they're going for. And beyond that, just like iterative development that we could get from it, we also just got like the feedback loop going excellently. So it's always been our plan to go into early access like fairly early on, and having that demo up and like making the game with our players already has really just like hammered that home for us.
So a few seconds ago, I was watching the gameplay and I saw that, you know, it went down and it was kind of like there were two sides with different skull icons, and then the one you land on determined like your pathway. And I'm curious to hear more about all the different kind of branches that you could wind up going down. How many different directions can we go? And, you know, is it all kind of RNG based, or is there an element of skill that kind of can play into choosing which way you're going to go?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we get questions about that a lot. I would say the like end battle navigation is things that players are so bittersweet on. Like some player, like we'll just get like, I wouldn't say angry, but like grumpy messages about it, being like, why would you put this in the game? You're removing the strategy. I wanted to get the treasure and I couldn't get the treasure. And then, you know, we'll watch streamers play, and some of their funniest moments are like trying to go one way and just getting a freak bounce and being sent the other way. So like it's a feature that's near and dear to my heart, and there's no way that we're ever going to remove it. But we do have some ways to influence it. So especially the ones during battle, you'll notice that it's just kind of like a random assortment of pegs at the end of a battle. And that's something that we're trying to put in without like explaining it overly. And I think most players pick up on it after like a few playthroughs. But what happens is that the only pegs that are remaining are pegs that you haven't cleared at all in that battle. So if you know ahead of time which direction you want to go, you can kind of start like steering your shots and making sure that side of the board is clear. But you're starting to get into like, not like top tier play, obviously, but like, you know, slightly higher tier play at that point. The kind of assumption that we have is for the first few matches, players aren't going to worry about discarding orbs, and they're not going to worry like too much about the crit. Eventually, this dagger won't be the default orb that you start with. And then we want there to be some layers of things that players can learn to start, you know, like actually getting better at some of the strategy to the game, in addition to kind of the natural skill that they're going to pick up from like learning our physics and being able to aim and everything.
Yeah, we have
a,
or at least I have.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. We've been talking a lot about a lot of features that we want to add to the game to help players really express themselves through the gameplay, to their gameplay. For example, one of the things that we want to do is add custom games. So that would be allowing the player to craft their game experience after, for example, beating the game. They could unlock a custom game mode that could allow them to craft the kind of map that they would experience, right? That we're talking about some stuff like that.
That's really, really cool. I think when any game has that opportunity to design your own course, it's always a lot of fun and really cool to see what people create, because they really go all out with that kind of stuff, and it's just awesome. We have a really great question from chat that I want to pass on from Sikoni, who asks, as a dev, what kind of strategies do you think will help take runs to the end?
Oh, interesting question. Yeah, it's definitely like my win rate is not as high as I would like it to be. Like relics are definitely very, very powerful currently, and they probably always will remain that way. So making sure that you're picking up whatever treasure chests might appear on the map. And then I would say one of the biggest things is just learning the strength of the elite fights, making sure that you have the tools so that you can ensure that you'll survive them. And even if you're taking like big chunks of damage, it's currently pretty easy to like recover that damage in Peglin. We let you heal after every battle. So getting those elite fights in early, which do give you relics, that's a good way to ensure that you're going to make it past the first boss here. Yeah, when it comes to actual like compositions, there are a bunch of different orbs that kind of strategize with each other. But from what I can tell, there isn't really like dominant strategies yet. I mean, there probably are, but we just haven't discovered them yet. But yeah, kind of matching your orb layout, your deck, to your relics as best you can. That kind of synergizing is really going to, that's going to give you a lot of power for sure.
Yeah, if I may, I'm finding that with the demo, like from a player perspective, because I'm not working on any of the programming or mechanical design, damage per second, or rather damage per turn, is really like the big thing, because all the enemies, some of them will toss projectiles at you and deal damage from afar, but usually that's more like chip damage. Like the big scary guys are the ones that take a few turns to slowly approach you. So at least for right now, with all the mechanics that we've got in the game, I'm personally finding that your best bet is to go for orb upgrades and like different relics that'll increase your total damage per shot, and then hopefully just wipe enemies out before they're capable of getting to you. The preventative, like good defense is a strong offense type of thing, seems to be really working for a lot of people right now. But I don't know how balance is going to change. Could be different. We're just going to have to see.
Yeah, and I think it will change a lot when we introduce classes to the game and allow people to tailor their experience a little bit more from the start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we should give a little rundown here, just in case people are confused about how the game is working. So we kind of talked about the gist of like, okay, here's the pegboard, here's how you get damage. We're trying to keep the base of it quite simple, aside from that, and then really layering on complexity through like piece by piece. Things like the different orbs having their own different mechanics, different relics. And then, of course, like the combinations of all of those coming together is really where we want that complexity to lie. So ideally, it should be like very simple to pick up, but have a lot of complexity that you would get out of like a roguelike deck builder, even if they don't look like cards. And yeah, I think one of the things here, yeah, that refresh peg is in a bit of a bad spot. But so yeah, we just had a mem orb come up, and that's an orb that we've kind of taken, a little bit more liberally from a card game that you might have. And it actually gets stronger and stronger the more pegs that have been cleared so far in that battle. So those are the kind of like interactions that we're looking to kind of tie into the game there. And then I will say that the Minotaur is like incredibly hard. So ensuring that you have relics before fighting some of those mini boss fights. Yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about that. There's we have, I would say, medium complexity play right now as well, starting with the dagger. The dagger is a very high risk, high reward orb. It really does next to nothing unless you get the crit with it, which is that yellow peg. So if you're unable to get the crit, then the dagger is really going to punish you. But if you're able to get the crit, it's easily one of the most powerful orbs in the game right now.
You touched on it a little bit in some of what you were talking about there, but it kind of leads to a really great question from Alchemist Joker in chat, who says, how has leaving the demo up helped with balancing and inspiring new ideas for content? I'm definitely interested to hear about how, the feedback you've gotten has impacted the game.
Yeah, it's been huge for sure. We're not taking as full advantage of it as I would like to be. There's a lot of talks from devs like the Slay the Spire devs and the devs of Monster Train, and they talk about the tools that they put in place to like capture data when players are playing. And I would love to get some more of that in, but we've been just such a lean indie team that we haven't really invested much in our tools yet. Now, that being said, it's still been incredibly valuable. It's allowed us to kind of build up a community where now we have people that are, interested in playtesting the upcoming content. We are constantly being given feedback on different things and being able to kind of, take temperature checks because we have enough like points of data of like, what do people think about this relic, or what do people think about this orb, or even like, I never hear people mention this. Is that just because it's underwhelming or underpowered, or are there other reasons? So yeah, just having the demo up and actually having people like playing the game, it's just been astounding. Like I'm a firm believer that games can't be made in a vacuum. Like a game is nothing without players. So having players early on while we're still like in there making changes all the time has just been super, super valuable to us.
Yeah, it's also been really good for us as a motivator to get people playing and giving you feedback about things you're doing, seeing the impact that it has on them, whether they like it or they don't like it. It's always been super rewarding.
Yeah, I think it's giving Adam a bit of a big head though, because everyone talks about how great the music is all the time. So that can't be good for us.
Yeah. I think it was just recently we got one tweet all the way from Japan, and it was just very, very concise. It was just, Peglin, I like background music. And like, that's the kind of thing that gets me up in the morning every day. Like, yeah, the players have been a massive motivator for the creative side of the game as well, right? New enemies, new like orb ideas, even new music ideas, right? I'll talk to people in the chat, and I'll even stream some of the music production to them whenever, inspiration hits. And it really creates that really neat sense of community whenever we decide to involve ourselves in it in a creative sense. Yeah, there have been some really great people in this in the Discord, and there's been really great ideas thrown around, and just everybody's super encouraging. So as a really small team where we all have to, pull a lot of weight and do a lot of work, it's always really, really helpful to just kind of bounce over to the chat in the other space and just kind of, recognize that there's other people recognizing us. It's a massive help.
That's amazing. It's really heartwarming to get to hear from your perspective how that kind of feedback and reception to your game really just fuels you, not only with like direct feedback like, hey, add this to the game, but also just like, I want to go because that person on Twitter from Japan liked the background music. Like, that's really, really great.
Yeah.
And speaking of the music, you talked a little bit about the music, and we have a question from Keisha in chat who wants to know, with the music portion of this game, what was the inspiration behind it? Were there other video games that helped with the writing process, or was it something that came pretty easy? And I definitely need to hear more, because when the trailer was playing and I wasn't on camera, I was like bopping in my chair. It was great.
Thank you. I'm really glad that you're liking it. There have been several different inspirations for the game, both within the mechanics and the like visual creativity from Sienna and all of her sprite work and everything, as well as just, some old favorites of mine and also of Dylan's. The first stuff he started handing me was from Legend of Dragoon, right? Some boss fight music and stuff like that. And that's been really great at like nailing the kind of intensity that we want for some of the boss fight music. And then in terms of like a stylistic approach and what instruments I chose to use, I've really drawn a lot from like Donkey Kong Country and Crash Bandicoot, two games that are very near and dear to my heart in a creative sense. But like both of the composers of those games, David Wise and Josh Mansell, have been like massive inspirations for Peglin. I don't know if it's just because we started with the Forest vibe and it just naturally rolled in, but yeah, if you go and listen to Crash Bandicoot 2, you'll hear a lot of similarities. The main instrument of the game is like a marimba, like a little wooden xylophone type instrument. And that was primarily inspired actually by the idea of the pegs just all across the board. I thought, if you're tossing a little orb and it's going to bounce off all the pegs, if they were musical, what would they sound like, right? And it just naturally fell into the kind of striking a marimba sound. And so you'll notice if you listen to some of the soundtrack in the forest where the Peglin is, or the Peglin, is his name Peglin? I don't know. I'm still not clear on that. You'll notice that a lot of the music is marimba focused, and that's just because that's where he naturally resides. And then as we move into our next area, the castle, you'll notice that there's a little bit of a pushback in a battle in the music where some of the castle instruments are pushing back, and then the marimba will push back. And then even during the boss fight, you'll notice the marimba getting interrupted and drowned out a little bit by the boss's signature instruments. So there is a little bit of like audible storytelling if you go and listen for it. We're still figuring out exactly where we want to take that in the later levels, but I can guarantee you if you listen to the whole soundtrack in sequence, it's going to feel like it's been telling a story. And I'm really excited to see that through.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and I will say on the music as well is, we have put like thousands of hours into the development of this game now. And like we've had Adam's music in there for 7 or 8 months probably, since about the beginning of this year. And like it hasn't started to grate on me yet. Like normally in like game dev, unless you're testing the music, like, you open it up and you drop the slider to 0 and it's just like, okay, I don't want to hear you until I'm like testing everything together. And I'll often just like leave it on, and then we'll just kind of be sitting there like bobbing my head being like, oh man, this is still going.
Yeah, it's been a massive improvement. It's added a lot of character to the game, and so many people have just straight up, the first thing they comment on is, this music is great.
This being like one of the first like big massive full OSTs that I've done personally, I'm really excited to try and give Peglin its own like audible identity and really have it stand out in the sense of like, you hear one of the songs from it and you can specifically tell it's, ripped right out of Peglin, right? There's other inspirations and, there's some instruments that are shared between other games, I'm sure, like composers would likely use a lot of the same libraries as me. But I really do want to make it stand out in terms of an audible identity. And I think so far with the feedback that we've received, we're hitting that pretty well. I don't mean to honk my own horn or anything, but you know, people have really claimed it to stand out from the rest, just in terms of it being, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, unique, I guess. Yeah, all I know is that other people think it stands out, and that makes me really happy and pushes me to want to really make sure that someone can hear it and within a second be able to tell where it's from and what game it's running.
It's really great listening to you all talk about the soundtrack, because I mean, this whole entire time we've been talking, it's very apparent the passion you have, but it's really cool to hear that about, you know, the musical side of things. And I'm curious if you have, you know, a musical piece that you've worked on for the game that really just was memorable for you, or that was kind of your favorite that you worked on, and if you could describe it for us.
I two basic battle themes, one for forest, one for castle, and then we have a standard boss theme, and then like a map reduction kind of the forest area. I think my favorite so far, of course, the more music I make, the more I get like, oh, this next one is even better than the last. What did I do last time? Come on, I'm constantly improving, just like any creative would, and that kind of, you know, diminishes my appreciation for the earlier stuff. But in the moment, the forest boss theme had to be my absolute favorite, just because of the kind of progression that I was able to push into it, right? It starts off very similar to the forest battle theme, and then slowly picks up with a little bit of extra guitar and some intensity. And as the big, you know, right now I think that our boss monster is just a large slime, like the giant red one that you've probably seen already on stream. Like as he approaches, the song kind of pushes you towards a more intense feeling, and there's this one melody in like the chorus that I think, I don't really know how to explain it. It's just incomparable. It really gives you that feeling of like being up against a threat, but not being afraid of it, being like up to a worthy challenge. And I think that emotion has really been sold to me and a lot of other people playing the demo. I've received a lot of feedback on it, about it being like the perfect transition from the battle theme to a thematically similar boss theme. So I'm really, really excited about that one. And yeah, I'm hoping I can outdo it with the next, of course.
That's great. I just love hearing about this kind of stuff, because I think a lot of games like this, sometimes they can miss out on, you know, the importance of having that music that really matches what's happening, and how it can really just fuel you to want to play a game more without you even realizing it. So it's really, really cool to hear about that. And thank you so much for joining us and showing us your game. It looks awesome. I'm super excited to play it. But for anybody watching who wants to check it out, where can they do that?
Yeah, so the best thing to do, especially with the Seattle Indies Expo running, will be to check out the Steam page that they have up with all of the games in it, because, you know, we're joining like a big cohort of excellent games. And then, of course, being on Steam helps us out a lot, because the more people download and play the demo or wishlist and follow the game, that really has the Steam algorithm shine on us. That's kind of all indie devs do these days, is pray to the algorithms, and that's half of our day job. Other than that, the game is also on itch. We have a demo there as well, and we'll be releasing it fully when we release early access on Steam. So if for whatever reason you have a big grudge against Steam, that's another place you can play it. But yeah, Steam would be the first place I would check.
Thank you so much. I definitely will be doing that. It's time for us to take a quick little break here. We'll be back in just a bit with 3 in a Rogue. But before we go, I want to remind you guys that the Seattle Indies Expo has 2